Hello everybody, my name is Danielle and welcome to or back to my channel. I'm back again with another interview, except this time round I had the absolute privilege of interviewing Debbie, who is a type 2 diabetic. I've gotten really lucky with these interviews. The women that I have interviewed have been absolutely amazing and such a delight. So similar process to last time, Debbie and I spoke about her diabetes and her personal experience, as well as skin conditions that have arisen because of her diabetes. Now, because Debbie has type 2 diabetes, she has actually endured quite a few skin conditions as skin conditions are more prevalent in a type 2 diabetic. So it was actually really interesting for me to hear her experience and to completely understand some other conditions that can come up because of her diabetes. Of course, I wanted to thank Debbie once again for helping me with my independent research project. Again, she was an absolute delight to interview, as you guys are about to see. If you could, please like, comment, and subscribe to this YouTube channel to follow along my series, and I hope you enjoy the interview. Hi Debbie, welcome. Thank you so much for helping me out with my independent research project all about diabetes and how it links to the skin. How's your day been?
Good, thank you.
That's good, I'm glad. Now we're just going to be talking about your diabetes and your experience and any skin conditions that have kind of arisen from your diabetes. What type of diabetes do you have?
Type 2.
Type 2 diabetes, beautiful. And how long have you had diabetes for?
It's 9 years. I was diagnosed in 2012.
Yep, okay, beautiful. And tell me the story of how you found out about your diabetes.
I used to donate blood and plasma,
Yeah.
and I had gone to do a donation, and they sent me out a letter with it was like a lab report, and told me to see a doctor immediately. And so I took that to my doctors, and he said it's showing signs that you're a diabetic. So they did a glucose tolerance test and confirmed that, yes, I had diabetes.
That's so interesting that you found out
Yeah,
that way.
so I don't know how long it would have gone undetected if I wasn't giving blood.
Yeah, very lucky that you were giving blood and you were kind of in that situation. Really, really lucky.
I've heard a lot of stories about people that don't know for years that they are one. So,
yeah, it's very, very common. Like I spoke to a type 1 diabetic who, like, if anyone who's watching this would have seen that video by now, but she found out when she was 13. And it's so funny, like the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes and the marginal difference between the two. It's just so funny. And how does diabetes affect your everyday life?
It doesn't really affect my everyday life. Like, I think I look after myself well, diet-wise, and exercise, because I have such a physical job too. But the only thing is always carrying food with me. If I was to have, in case I have a hypo or something, so I've always got something on me somewhere, in my bag, in my car. I don't go anywhere without food.
And what type of foods do you normally carry around with you?
Usually something like a muesli bar, or sometimes even like just a roll of lollies or something like that. Like if a hypo comes on, it's quite scary and quite fast.
Of course.
So so like I might eat lollies, and then I know that my next step is to go to a carb, because it's longer lasting. Like a sugar will give you a spike, where a carb will, flatten the curve. So
100%.
So I'm usually carrying something for the spike.
100%. And did you ever feel like you had to hide your diabetes, or were you quite open about it?
No, when I was first diagnosed with diabetes, I didn't want to tell anyone, because it's associated with obesity and not looking after yourself. So I used to think, well, people were going to go, well, if you weren't, if you looked after yourself and you weren't, carrying so much weight, then it wouldn't have happened. So I used to hide it. I didn't want to tell people when I was first diagnosed with it. But because it's not in my family history either. There's nobody with it, and we couldn't work out why I had it. And I've got a condition called PCOS, polycystic ovarian disease. And it's quite common to develop it because of that. So that was where it came from.
Yeah, it's funny how so many different things link to diabetes. So even like through my research with skin conditions, like there are so many different skin conditions that you can get from your diabetes, or even vice versa. Like, you can have a certain skin condition and then develop diabetes because of the skin condition, which I thought was really interesting. I know, it's quite interesting. And so what type of foods do you normally try and avoid?
So high sugar foods, but also your carbs and high processed foods. So things like meat pies and sausage rolls.
Yeah.
They've got, you know, they set you off as well because they're just it's a big carbohydrate. Pasta, especially things like pasta, and that in moderation as well.
Yes.
So because they will send your sugar levels high.
When you have pasta, do you have to weigh out kind of how much pasta that you're having, or do you normally just kind of just go for it?
Yeah, I don't really measure out anything. Pasta is probably the only thing on there that I have. I don't really have pies or sausage rolls or anything like that. So pasta is probably my biggest carb when it comes to meals. Other than that, my eating's pretty clean, I would say.
Pretty good. So, yeah, of course. And you'd definitely be more conscious of it ever since being diagnosed, like, for sure. Definitely. Now, do you have any regular appointments that you do need to attend just to double check that your diabetes is okay?
Yeah, I see my doctor every 6 months and get blood works done.
Yeah.
So I know, you know, what my HbA1cs and my cholesterol and all that are.
Yeah.
And I also see a podiatrist every 8 weeks, and I get my eyes checked. Not just vision, but I have a diabetic test on my eyes done every 12 months.
Oh, interesting. That's so interesting. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, because it's a vascular disease. My doctor once said that, like, the vascular side of it is more dangerous than the diabetes itself, because it's your heart and the vessels behind your eyes, so you can go blind. Things like that. So
yes, that does make sense actually, because obviously over time the vessels can constrict and it can cause other, you know, conditions over time.
So
something that I've read.
It's just a check they do behind the eyes to see what the vessels behind it are looking like, to make sure they're not, you know, starting to show any effects. So
it's very interesting. Now, have you had any scares with your diabetes, like any, you know, hospital trips or anything like that?
Yeah, I haven't had. I've had a scare with an accident I had.
Yeah.
I've not had a scare directly with diabetes, but I had an accident in 2016 where I slipped on some rocks in northern Queensland, and because it was December, the humidity is in the 90s, and there's bugs that live in the water up there. So I got a very nasty infection that resulted in 5 weeks in hospital. And by the time I presented to hospital, because they treated me there and then I flew home 2 days later, by the time I got here, the next day I was put into hospital, and they weren't sure then if they could save the leg. They thought they were going to have to amputate it, because the infection and the cellulitis was up to the knee. And so that was a pretty scary.
That's
very
scary.
Then they kept talking about the diabetes, the healing process because of the diabetes. But it did respond well. It healed well, maybe a bit slower because I'm a diabetic, but it healed well. And I also attributed that to watching what I do and making sure my levels are always good, because my HbA1cs were always within range. So I sort of attribute that's, you know, how well it recovered to how well I looked after myself.
100%. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have done some research obviously into the wound healing side of things, and it is very common for diabetics to have a very impaired wound healing process, but also in terms of infection is actually it is actually the highest skin condition that you can get from your diabetes. So it doesn't surprise me that you know, you had that scare of, you know, almost having your leg amputated, which is quite scary.
Yeah, and they sort of said, you know, because it's the leg, further away from the heart, it's, you know, there's not much circulation. And I was actually in a ward with a few diabetics, and there was a man next to me who had leg ulcers and was a diabetic, and they just couldn't, months had been treating him and they just couldn't get them to heal.
I can imagine it would be like a full-on process, especially with diabetic foot, which I'm going to be looking into. So that'll be really interesting to kind of learn about that as well. Now, for those of you who don't, or for the people that at home that don't know, how do you normally check your glucose levels?
Just a prick test on my finger with a blood sample on a test strip in a glucose monitor.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't progressed to insulin yet, so I'm managing it with medication and just diet.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I do understand it's a progressive disease and
For
will
sure.
most likely end up with insulin at some point. So,
yes. Yeah, definitely. And what do you think is the hardest part about being a diabetic?
the hardest part is that I love sweet stuff.
Yeah, don't we all?
Can't eat it. Yeah, I always did love sweet stuff, and and I can't eat that. And just making sure, I think it's hard to make sure you've always got something on you. I have been caught out where I haven't taken anything because I haven't had a hypo for a while, and you can feel it coming, and it's kind of a scary thing. But that's really the only
Yeah,
things
and
that
how does it feel when, like internally, when you you can feel like a hypo coming up? Just for those of you who
I get the shakes.
Yeah.
And I also notice my motor skills don't work. So even, if I buy a bag of lollies, say, I have trouble opening the bag because, it sort of moves rapidly, but you start to lose those skills of just motor functioning skills. You start to drop things, can't open things. You get quite shaky. They're kind of scary.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that would be definitely very scary to
Yeah.
occur. Yeah, definitely. And what do you think is the best part about being a diabetic?
Probably the constant medical checks. So you're on
Yeah.
top of it all the time. Like I'd like to think that you would be aware if you were heading into dangerous ground with cholesterol and things like that, because it's all being checked constantly.
Yeah, yeah,
I feel
definitely.
that's probably the best
Yeah,
part of it.
for sure. Like you would feel like you're definitely on top of your health.
Yeah.
While having those checks. So I can see why that would be the best part for sure. And have you developed, obviously, apart from the infection and, almost removing your leg, have you experienced any dry skin conditions or any other skin conditions that have kind of arisen?
I have dry skin, but mainly on my feet, and which is why I look after them so much, because I know the dry skin can lead to cracks, can lead to infection. So, and that's also why I see the podiatrist all the time as well. But the other thing I notice in particularly sort of summer or heat is the rashes you get in creases like your elbows, the inside of your elbows behind your knees.
Yeah.
I developed, and that's only ever been since I've become a diabetic. So I don't know why, but and they just sort of spread if you don't sort of treat them and get on top of them. So
definitely. Yeah. Well, my nana, she had type 2 diabetes as well, and that's kind of what inspired me to do this series.
Okay.
But yeah, she had a lot of dry skin conditions, and especially on her feet, she would have a podiatrist that would come to her house, and because she was quite. She struggled with her walking and stuff like that. But she would have a podiatrist that would come to her house and would, give her like pedicures, I guess, which was quite nice. But yeah, I feel like that's a very common theme in type 2 diabetics, where, they have a lot of like,
feet issues.
Yeah, exactly right. And a lot of dry skin conditions can arise from that as well. Now, how long does it normally take for your wound healing process to,
I find actually that it takes quite a while for things to heal. I cut my shin a couple of weeks back on just on my car door, and I just found it took a couple of weeks where normally a couple of days it would close up. It took a couple of weeks, and I also find it's still a scar. It's still quite a dark scar, and it'll probably be like that for quite a few months. Like I find that the discoloration sort of hangs around with even if you scratch a mozzie bite or something like that, it stays for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. That's another common theme that I've kind of found. The wound healing process kind of is elongated, and also the pigment that kind of stays from that is very common. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And what advice would you give someone who's just been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes?
Educate yourself.
It
was like my doctor sort of said, oh, you've got type 2 diabetes, and off you go. He just gave me some medications. He never told me about testing strips or how to test myself. He never gave me, I found that I really needed to educate myself. I contacted Diabetes Australia and I did a course with them, a day thing that sort of filled you in on things to look for and how to look after yourself. And I also joined Diabetic Living, a publication, you just need to educate yourself on, because people just go, oh, it's just sugar, but it's not just sugar. It's, there's lots of things and you shouldn't be eating and how to prepare food. And so I think education would be what I would tell people, really educate yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's really nice that they have quite a few resources there to kind of help you through the process, because I can imagine it would be such a intense adjustment, because you would have gone from just living this everyday life, not worrying about your glucose levels, to all of a sudden carrying food around all the time and having to check your glucose levels all day, So it's really nice that they kind of have those resources there to help you through the process. And do you feel as though there should be more of a conversation with diabetes and the skin conditions that can arise from it?
I think so. Because I don't think people realise that a skin condition can get away quite quickly and be very hard to heal, and sometimes can't heal, and you go down the path of amputations and things like that. So
exactly, it can be a really scary process.
Because I don't think people realise how much it affects you. It's not just your food. There's a whole array of things, and there's not much. There's not much out there unless you educate yourself. So
100% for sure. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Same to you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.